Hey, everybody, welcome back to another fantastic edition of the His and Her Money Show, where we make it our business and a priority to help you take dominion over your money and your life. Do us a favor if you hear something fantastic, a nugget, a jewel drop today, and you will. Do us the huge favor of sharing it with your friends. Put it on social media. Let everybody know that you're rocking with the His and Her Money Show and tag us at His and Her Money so we can show you love right back. I think you're going to be incredibly inspired today by a young man who had a determination to do something different and better with his money and then did it. And his story is going to help you create one of your own. I am absolutely certain of this fact. We're going to be talking with none other than Stephen Stack, and he's going to talk to you about his personal finance journey. And trust me when I tell you, you're going to want to get your pen and paper or your notes app out to take down the gems that are dropped so that you can create a brand new freedom story for yourself. So let's not delay this any further. Let's get Stephen on to hear about his journey and his advice for us all. Hey, Stephen, welcome to the His and Her Money Show.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Super glad to have you here, man. Heard about you, listened to some interviews of you, read about you, and I just had to get you on so you can come and inspire the His and Her Money community, man. So we're excited to have you here. But some people are being introduced to you for the first time right here and right now. So can you say hello to them and let them know what you're all about, man?
Yeah, so like you said, my name is Steven Stack, and I'm very enthusiastic and passionate about finance. I'm actually a man of faith, so the way I think about money is through that lens. But I really look to try to help people be able to win with money and take a lot of the experiences that I've personally had with being able to build wealth, pay off debt. So I guess I'll say this real quickly. I am 100% debt free. That includes my home. And I've actually been a millionaire since age 31. So I speak from a wealth of experience in being able to help people build wealth.
Come on now. Now he done got y'all attention. Now I bet you tuned in now. I told you to get ready. You're about to get some info and some inspiration. So, Stephen, you became debt free, became a millionaire in your 30s, brother. Take us back to the beginning, though. Was this something that was always in you? Were you a young prodigy with the calculators and the understanding of interest bearing accounts and like what was your upbringing like and how did it lend to the destination that you're at right now financially?
Yeah, so it's kind of a mix of both. So my I can actually remember my mom telling me a story that when I was 7, that I came up to her one day and declared, "Mom, I don't want to play with toys anymore. That's for kids." So I don't remember saying this, but she said I did. Now I would play with the toys when my friends were over, but when they weren't, I'd go off and read or do whatever. But I think there was always something that was really rooted in me, and I can remember clear moments of that. I remember being 8 years old. We're on a family vacation at the motel, not the hotel, the motel. So we're literally outside, like you pull up to your room from outside and go in. And I can remember at 8 years old thinking, "Man, I wonder who owns this place." And how much do they make? And I had enough sense to know that it wasn't the person working in the front desk or the people that would do housekeeping, things like that. So there would be little mini moments like that throughout life that had me thinking that way. uh, but my foundation of coming up, being raised as a kid, was around my parents teaching, hey, live within your means, so don't spend more than what you make. They were savers, and my concept of investing was putting money in like a CD or a bank CD, certificate of deposit. So that piqued my interest of, hey, I can put money somewhere, get paid in an already agreed upon interest rate, um, and have more than what I started with. But that's all I really knew coming up. It wasn't until a lot later that I really discovered and threw myself into true investing.
So let's talk about it. Where did that next level thinking begin for you? Because a lot of people, as they're coming up, maybe they're only thinking about, I got to get the good grades to get to a good college, and I got to get to college. Well, I don't have the money to pay for it, so I'm going to get student loans. And then they start their career with these student loans around their neck and just kind of starting from behind. That's a lot of people's story. Unbeknownst to them, they were a part of a system that was created to kind of hold them back a little bit there, to help them start in a disadvantage. But it was the quote unquote American dream, and it was what was sold to a lot of us, and to no fault of our own. Where did you fall in that? Did you subscribe to a similar narrative, or did you always have an alternate path in your mind to do things differently financially, or was there a learning curve for you too?
It was a little of both. So I would say that where it really clicked for me, I was in college. So coming into school, I knew I wanted to be in a position to graduate from college without any student loans, without any debt. And so between my mentality of going after scholarships and be in positions where my parents did have some funds to help, but the overwhelming majority of my schooling was covered by scholarships and writing essays and doing community service and all these types of things. Like by my senior year, I was getting paid to go to school, which I gotta mention my school, Clemson University, is where I attended, and I studied engineering. So um,
Now, I don't want to move past that. That's huge. That you had the foresight, or you had the people in your life to give you the foresight that as a high school student, you're applying for all these scholarships and you're writing essays, and some people might have heard scholarship and automatically assume sports or something like that. So, talk. How did you start thinking about scholarships? Was it your guidance counselor? Was it your parents? Like, who told you to start doing this? And like, what was that process like? Because there's some parents right now listening who have kids in high school, and they need to know like what went on for you to be able to, like, as you just said, by the time you were a senior, getting paid to go to college.
yeah, yeah. So it was. So I'm actually the youngest of three. So I had an older brother, older sister that I saw them go through school. So I was able to learn some things from how they navigated through. And as far as scholarships, I was in the top, like, I don't know, 3 or 5% of my class as far as GPA, and had a certain, level of accomplishment that allowed me to get a scholarship. I don't know if it still exists anymore. It was called the Palmetto Fellow Scholarship, which at the time was like $10,000 if you were in STEM, so science, technology, engineering, math, in one of those types of disciplines or degrees. So I had already had a big chunk towards my schooling just from that, from a state perspective. And I'll say this to parents with kids that are getting there. When you think about your dream school, um, I think a big factor to play in it is the affordability of it. So for me, I was actually looking at potentially going to UNC, University North Carolina, Chapel Hill, until I saw that out of state tuition. And then I quickly realized, oh, you know what? Maybe the only reason I wanted to go there was because Michael Jordan played basketball there. so, so I was like, yeah, UNC. It doesn't matter if I got accepted or not. uh, this is just way more cost than what I believe the return on investment would be to go there. So that helped me even more so narrow down to Clemson, which was an in-state school for me at that time because I came up in South Carolina. So those were some of the dynamics that were going on in making that decision to go there with a plan of walking across that stage, not owing anybody anything once I took that piece of paper in the degree. So So hopefully that helps flesh that out a little better.
Absolutely. So what happened next? You got the scholarships, you knocked it out, went got your engineering degree, and here comes adulthood. What happened next?
Right. So one thing I'll take a slight step back and then propel us forward is it was while I was at Clemson that I realized that I could not save my way to wealth. And that was a very important realization for me to come to grips with. Because I was kind of doing the numbers. I'm like, okay, well, if I could save $20,000 a year, how long would it take me to get to 1 million? And I realized it would take me 50 years to get there. And I'm like, this will take me forever. Like, there's got to be a way to compound my efforts to get there sooner because I had this dream, this vision of being wealthy while being relatively young to enjoy it. Um, so that was something that was at play in my mind. So eventually I graduate, I get into the working world, and I won't say the guy's name, but if he's listening to this, he'll know I'm talking about him. But when we graduated together, before we had graduated, he asked me if I'd help him make a budget for him starting his career in engineering. At the time he was going to work for a company called Michelin, and so we sat down. We knew what his offer letter was, how much he'd make. We tried to figure out roughly how much he'd get after tax, and we made a budget for him that made sense. And for me, after doing that for him, I sat back and I was like, man, I'm going to be making even more than he does or he will. And my nicest piece of furniture currently is a futon. So I don't really have a lot of, high taste for myself of what I have to do or have to have. And I'm like, a lot of the people, when I would have graduated, it was literally during the Great Recession. So a lot of people, in that 08, 09 time frame didn't have a job lined up. So I'm like, man, I'm really fortunate to have a role that's actually, a healthy paying role too. Um, Let me just live regular, like live relative to just being a young person coming out of school. I don't have to quote unquote get all this stuff because I deserve it, quote unquote. Let me just keep my head down and see what kind of damage I can do in a decade. And so that was really my mentality. I did do things for fun, like I would do some stuff for enjoyment. Um, but I wasn't really moved by what I would see on social media from my peers and friends and so on, because my mentality was I want to put in the work early.
Now, did this start out from day one? Because you said in your answer, let me see how the next decade is going to go. So, was that your goal that in 10 years, I'm going to hit X, Y, and Z number? Like, what were you outlining for yourself as the target? You were willing to make the sacrifices. You said, I'm going to live small, like a person coming out of college. I don't have to get this, that, or the other. So, what was your target in mind for this 10-year journey that you were about to go on?
So my mentality was I wanted to be quote unquote retirable by age 45. That was the only goal that I had for myself. And when I say retirable, what I mean is that I that I wouldn't be as concerned about what I did for a living. Or that money wouldn't be the primary driver for what I would do to generate income. So that's all I kind of knew. And like I said, I made up that word at the time, retirable. Um, I think nowadays people would call it work optional. Um, or just I maybe like work flexible. Of I'm like by 45, I would want to be in a space where if I wanted to be an ice cream truck driver, um, that I could. So that was the level of vision I had around it, um, and went from there. And if you don't mind, can I just speak to the people just directly for a quick second? Okay, so for perfect. So for many of you, you kind of have a feel directionally of where you want to go, but you don't have all the answers and all the steps laid out. My encouragement for you would be, and you can take inspiration off of my own story, is get moving anyway. Get moving anyway. Clarify your vision as you go, but don't wait until you've got it all together to start. And that was the big thing for me as a young person, is I didn't have all of the pieces put together, but I had a general feel for where I wanted to be headed, and I just started moving. And over time I got more clarity, more direction, more wisdom, more discernment, and then even just outside guidance that helped me drive towards the direction I ended up being in.
Nice. So, talk to us about some of the financial moves that you made. You talked about you adapted a new mindset that you weren't going to be tempted by the things you saw on social media, the things that your friends were doing, and that you were going to maintain a certain level of lifestyle and you weren't going to let it inflate past something that was outside of who you were. So, you talked about the sacrifices. Now, what moves did you put into motion that maximized the sacrifices that you were willing to make?
So there was two primary drivers for me. I I had a loose understanding when I started about the stock market. And so I said, okay, well, I'm going to begin with at least utilizing or taking advantage of like an employer sponsored plan, like a 401k. So that was one space I started of saying, hey, I'm going to really put aside money uh, at that time on a pre-tax basis. Um, and then I also knew about real estate. Even though I didn't really know anyone who was actively doing it, I had a desire to get into that space. And I'd actually seen it in a movie called Inside Man. Denzel Washington is in the movie, and there's a random line in the movie where someone said, "When there's blood in the streets, buy property." And that really stuck with me because at the time we're coming out of the Great Recession. So I'm like, okay, the prices on things must be really low. Um, so I need to figure out on the fly how to get into real estate. And so I just started talking to people and just expressing my desires to get into that space and looking for help, whether paid or free, um, to get exposure to that until I was in and actively doing it. So those were the things that I really pressed into, was real estate and the stock market.
All right, so let's unpack, both of them. So let's start with the stock market. So were you using the 401k at your job? Were you doing it independently through an IRA? And talk about, how you made the decision on I'm gonna put this percentage or this dollar amount into this, that, or the other, so people can kind of, figure out a pathway for themselves.
Yeah, so for when I first started, it was just the work 401k, and I said, "Hey, let me just max this thing out because I'm just coming out of school, don't have a bunch of stuff, don't have a ton of expenses. It was just me." And so I'm like, "Let me see if I can make life work while maxing this thing out." Um, even though it's something that I wouldn't see until 59 and a half without any penalties associated with it. I still had more of a long range, long term view. And I'll mention this at being a person of faith. I'm like, hey, if I'm thinking about things like eternity, then it's a lot easier to think about the next 30 to 40 years. Um, so that's where I started. Now, later on, I started adding in things like a Roth IRA or a health savings account, um, different types of vehicles that are tax advantaged to be able to build wealth. And then my favorite um, is that like the taxable brokerage type accounts. And the reason why I say that is uh, I started to get really excited about, oh, I'm building wealth in vehicles that I can access with no penalty south of age 59 and a half, because that's where you start to really cut down on your, working years or just your flexibility of how you move.
And so for people who are like, okay, that sounds like some interesting things. You talked about a 401k, an IRA, HSA, taxable account. And so they're like, okay, where do I start? Do I start like him with the maxing out or attempting to max out the 401k? And was it a factor for you in maxing it out? Did your company have a match? Or was it just the fact that I knew that, this is a great way to sock some money away pre-tax, and it'll help make me more tax advantage when it comes to tax time. So somebody is hearing all these things and they're like, okay, which one of those do? What would you tell them?
Right, right, right. I'd say the simplest would be to start with getting the maximum match that's provided if your employer gives a match with their 401k or 403b, TSP, 457. Like these, I know I'm shooting out a lot of different numbers and letters, um, but whatever applies to you, um, I would say start with getting the match. Some people will call it free money. I Sometimes I'll refer to it that way, but the way I like to really say it to help people to understand is if you're not taking advantage of the match, you're actually taking a pay cut. So it's not actually free money. It's part of your compensation package from your employer. So if you don't take advantage of it, they just keep the money because it's already earmarked for you in the event that you sock that money aside. So I would say to start there, to at least not leave money on the table for yourself personally. Um, and then you can start to branch out into some of the different types of uh, investment vehicles to be able to build wealth. Now, personal finance is personal, so it's going to vary from one person or family to the next. But that's where I would say to start, just kind of sight unseen, not knowing people's
Yeah.
situation.
Now, some people are a lot of people actually are going to follow your advice and they're going to call their HR rep and they're like, hey, tell me about my 401k or my TSP 457 or whatever they have. And they're going to get either this brochure or they're going to get a link to a website and they're going to see like all these different funds to choose from. And they're going to be like stars in their eyes. So I'm wondering for you, as you were starting this journey, like, how are you educating yourself to understand what you were dealing with, and how did you go about making the decisions as to what you were going to put in your 401k or your IRA and on and on and on?
Right. Yeah. So when I started personally, um, I just I had a general feel. So I'm like, okay, well, if I don't know a whole lot about it, I probably should get some more broad, diversified things. So what I did is I bought something that was, when I started off, it was something similar to a market index like a Dow Jones or S&P 500, things like that. And because I'm like, hey, the company that I worked for was a Fortune 500 company, I said, and I'll do 90% into that, the kind of broad stuff, and then I did 10% into the company that I was working for at that time. So that's where I started. Um, if I were talking to someone today, um, just a general rule of thumb, if you don't have any understanding, is I'd probably go for one of those broad kind of indexes. That could be a good place to start, and look at some of the fees that are associated with it, to help you try to trim down into where you want to be, or where you want your money to go. And research, read, get more understanding into what your money is going into, because no one's going to care about your finances more than you.
You got some favorite resources that you have read or currently read in this vein to help people,
Oh man. Um, as far as picking, um,
or just getting comfortable with their
I
money?
would say, oh, just so I would think just a good read just in general, kind of across the board, that'll help people get in the right mindset and framework would be a book called The Millionaire Next Door. Um, it it helps to even cut through some of the noise of what does wealth actually typically look like. How do people generally move that have attained real wealth? There's a lot of things that are would be surprising for people. So that's probably a personal favorite. I know they did like some type of 25-year uh, like
Yeah, his
edition.
daughter.
Yep, yep,
Yeah,
yep. Um,
and
which
I think
updated a lot of things.
it's the next Millionaire Next Door.
Right, 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 right. And it updates some things. Like the first one's is still pretty timeless. Like it's evergreen content. The second one kind of brings us a little closer to now. Um, but I think that would be a really good starting point for people just to get an understanding of, hey, how do people who literally, if you're a millionaire, you're in the top fraction of 1% of wealth in the world. How do they think? How are they doing what they do?
Yeah, good stuff. Now you got your money rolling as far as your investments, and then you decided that, you know what, I also need to start thinking about maybe investing in real estate. So talk to us about your foray into the world of real estate. There's so many different strategies out there by which you can invest in real estate. What was appealing to you, and what did you ultimately decide to do?
Yeah, so my what I did was I started with doing rehabs or flips, which what that is you acquire a property, you put money into it for repairs, and then you sell it for more than your acquisition and repair costs combined, as well as like your holding costs, and that's your profit. So I started with doing that, with a mentality that I always wanted to get into more of the buy and hold rental side. So I did a few flips to get chunks of money that I turned around and used to start buying multifamily properties, which was very lucrative, um, for me. Literally every multifamily property that I purchased, uh, it gave a ROI multiple times over what the original investment was. Like every single one of them ended up being dramatic home runs. Now, my mentality is I was looking for, if I'm using, I guess, sports, I was just looking for like just a single or a double. You know what I mean? Like just a good, solid investment. And each of them graciously turned out to be dramatically and significantly uh, great investments. But that's where I started, was doing the flips and then turning around and getting into multifamily investing, which I'm still a huge fan of doing that, and some of the economies of scale that you get from having multiple units for one property.
Okay. So you went into the real estate endeavors thinking about buy and hold, but you felt like you needed to raise the capital to be able to get the type of properties that you wanted, which was multifamily. So, how did you go about learning how to flip houses? And did you have a target um, bucket of money in mind that you wanted to hit before you then switched up the strategy and started to go into buy and hold?
Yeah, so today I would. Back then I just was, and this is why I say there's hope for everyone who's listening, is I was a young kid in my early 20s, and I just was like, well, if we're in a recession and things are as bad as what they say, then I should buy some property. You know what I mean? And just try to figure it out. And as long as the selling price at the end of the day, that, as long as I felt that that was going to end up being higher than how much I had to pay to get it and the estimated costs to repair it and just hold it until I could sell it, then I'm like, okay, that's a win. Because I was just like, man, I just wanted to build up some chunks of money and then try to buy a few properties. So I meant what I said earlier of, hey, get in motion and start to figure out some of your targets, because sometimes we have paralysis by analysis of, like, we're trying to get every last little detail lined up and then we just never start. My story was one of, you guys can hear that I did have some foresight and forethought into where I wanted to be, but there was so much that I didn't know at the time, but I learned as I went. So, but I guess I'd say my target was to, if I had to pin it down, I wanted to make about $10,000 for each one. That's what I was hoping for to get with each flip.
Now, when you moved into multifamily, were you, for you, because that word can mean a lot of things to a lot of people. What does multifamily mean? Because somebody heard that and thinking, did this brother buy an apartment building? Talk about when you say that you like multifamily then and you like multifamily now. Can you unpack what you mean by multifamily and why you like it so much?
Yes. So for then, I really was looking at 2 to 4 units. So duplex, triplex, quadruplex. That was the lane I was looking at, because you could get a residential loan for those. It's not technically a commercial property at that number of units. Um, so that's what I was looking at doing, and even today I still will look at properties that have that number of units. Now, of course, you can scale up from there and look at bigger. It doesn't have to be 100 units. I mean, you might could look at something that's 6 or 10 or maybe 15. Um, but I just chose to start with that 2 to 4 on multifamily properties. Um, Again, because it's like, hey, there's only one lawn to cut. There's only one roof to maintain, uh, which would be the same if it was a single family, but you have more than one tenant there. So that was part of the reasoning for why I looked at it then and why I still like it now.
So take us back to that first deal. What was it? Was it a two, three, or four? And like, break it down. Like you went through the flipping process to get some money. So you said that because it's with two, three, or four units, you can still use a residential loan. So unpack that for the people who are like, huh, this sounds interesting. I think I might want to get into that.
Yeah, yeah. So I started with duplexes, so just 2 units. Um, my first one was actually out of state. It was in Florida. Um, that I had purchased my first one. And actually that first one, man, I'd love for the prices to be this today. But at the time it was $50,000 for a duplex. Yeah. And to put in perspective, at the height of the housing market boom before we had the bust, um, these were going for $250,000. Um, so I knew there was a nice little runway of being able to work with it. And there were people who, that first one that I bought, the owner had owned it for quite some time, was an older person. They were ready to just go on ahead and move on, take their cash and roll. They didn't want to deal with the headache of it. And I'm like, hey, please give me your headache. Uh, so I purchased it, and for that one, I didn't have any kind of real investment chop, so I had to put down a 25% was the down payment for it, and did like a regular standard conventional loan, fixed rate. So it would have been very similar to buying a house to live in personally myself. The interest rate was a little bit higher because it was an investment property, because I wasn't living in it. So for some people, how you may want to start is doing something called house hacking, where you actually live in one of the units and rent out the other side. That's another way to do it. And there's a lot of benefits that you can get from doing it that way because you actually live in it. But like I said, for this one, I didn't. It was out of state. So purchased it. Uh, did immediately just started talking to the tenants, getting a feel for what were things that they desired, as well as looking at the inspection that I had done on the property to see what things needed to be addressed. Um, and quickly just started making it a place that a person would be proud to live in. Just because my mentality really with all things investing is not just the pure transaction itself, it's doing well by people. um, and so my mentality was, hey, there are people that live here that are created in the image of God, that live in this property, move and invest in that kind of vein. So that was really more my mentality, is to make things more reasonable. Now, I didn't mean marble countertops, you know what I mean, or what I mean, like the fanciest of things. But what it did mean is that I wanted it to be better than what I saw that it was. And that worked very well for me. Was able to move the rents more to what was appropriate for the area, and without like jacking it up on people either. So like just kind of progressively moving it to be where it should be, um, and preventing a lot of the turnover that would come from jacking up the rent immediately, but people being able to see the benefits and improvements of it. And so it was fruitful, and I really took that mentality towards every property of that way. And you learn, you get better, you get sharper. For people who are listening, I did not have anywhere near the answers that I would have today, um, because I was in process. I was in process learning, leaning on the people on my team. I had a property manager that helped uh, with it. So that would be, if my encouragement again would be, find people that can help you that have done it. Um, get moving in the direction that you want to go. You'll never be able to learn all there is to know until you're actually doing it.
Man, I got to tell you, man. I'm listening. I'm like, man, this is wild, man. I'm like, dang, you were practicing what you preach. You just like, look, I'm gonna just jump out here and figure out how to use the parachute on the way down.
Right, right,
So
right.
I mean,
Yeah, man.
your first real estate transaction, you decide, let me make it even harder by doing it in another state. So, like, why? Why did you do that? And then how did you even find this property in like three states away and like do all the like how did you do that?
Right. So when I said earlier, like I would just talk about what it was that I was looking to do. And uh, like I ended up being connected with somebody that I actually attended church with, of all things. Um, and this person was doing some real estate investing down in Florida and just was just telling me about stuff down that way. And I took a liking to me of just, hey, I can see where this young brother is trying to get to, and I just want to try to help him. And so he connected me with people down there, um, to get to know property manager, and he had a realtor that had helped him with real estate properties down in that area as well. So like I did have like a warm intro into it of meeting someone that I got to know over time that grew to trust. Um, and they gave me a an assist to get into that market, to start the investing down that way. So I know it's still kind of wild for me to say it the way I said it, but hopefully that makes it a little less crazy.
No, I love this, man. Listen, we are all on an adventure called the Steven Stack journey right now. So this is fun for me. I love it. I love it.
Okay.
So you started with this duplex. Where are you at now when it comes to your portfolio?
Oh man, um, it's pretty healthy. I uh, I I'm in process on some things right now. But let's just say it was at a definitely at a double digit door pace.
And are you still like all
But
over the
I'm
place as far as locations, states?
yes. So I technically don't count my personal home as one of them. If I did, then obviously I own in North Carolina, um, and Florida, Texas, and South Carolina would be the states that I'm in. So I actually currently at this moment, outside of my personal home, I don't have anything in my home state at this time. That may be subject to change though.
Okay. And what is your mentality as far as this? Because this is something actually that Ty and I have been discussing like heavily because we've been talking about getting into investing in real estate for a while, and just now we have started the church, so that kind of puts some things on hold while we're focusing on getting the church off the ground. But we're debt free completely, house, everything, just like you. And so it's like, do we try to continue that when it comes to the investing, or do we get a mortgage and accelerate the payoff, or do we just get a mortgage and just let the tenants pay it off? So for you, as somebody who's personally was focused on getting out of debt and all that, you paid off your house. What was your mentality when it comes to that? When it comes to investment properties?
So when I started, what helped me as a more debt averse person, um, was I I did take out a loan for getting that first property, that first duplex, as far as the multifamily. Um, but I kept it in a space where I knew I knew I could pay for the property if I had to, like that I had the assets available to cover the loan if the you know what hit the fan. So that was my personal way of managing that, and as wealth grew, um, I kind of kept that mentality around it on the real estate side, because eventually, just assets built to a point where could do significantly more um, with acquiring properties.
All right. So you've read a lot, you've done a lot, you've experienced a lot. So, how would you instruct someone who is you today that you were back then, and they're standing ready to take your advice and not get a single family home, but get a multi-family unit, knowing all the different ins and outs that you've been through and that you learned about? What would be your advice to that person on how they should start today? There's no great recession going on. Matter of fact, the market in some places is inflated in the other direction, where in some markets it's impossible to find anything. So, what's your words of wisdom in 2022 for somebody who's trying to get their net worth up? Because one of the things you said at the beginning is there's no way I'm going to be able to save my way to wealth, and they're like that. For some people, that hit them right in the chest, like, dang, you're right, man. This I got to do more than save. And so, what would you tell them?
So I'll try to answer it on the real estate side, and then just kind of the macro side too. Is um, depending on what your level of understanding is with real estate. So let's say you feel comfortable, like you're in a space where you're like, hey, I know what I'm looking for already, and and I have some money tucked aside, and I'm really just looking to pull the trigger. Just keep researching, looking. You can have a realtor or whomever also looking according to whatever parameters you have set of what you're looking for, especially in these times with housing prices being pretty wild. Um, there's still diamonds in the rough. There are. There's a deal. I won't say where it is, but I mean I saw a fiveplex that I couldn't believe what the price point was on it. In this crazy environment that we're in, it still was a steal of a deal. So there's still things that are out there to be had. So I'd say keep keep looking, um, and be ready when the opportunity comes. Now the big picture, just building assets, building wealth. Um, where inflation's going crazy, which inflation, I want to assume people know, it just means the cost of stuff is more, or the buying power of our money, of our dollar, is shrinking over time. Um, we've got wars going on, and rumors of wars, and food supply shortage. I mean, so there's all these different dynamics that are at play right now. um, my encouragement is buy assets, like even in the midst of all the crazy, because big picture, the market historically goes up over time, especially if you're looking at the long haul. If you're saying, hey, I'm looking at the next 10 years or 20 years, then you'll be happy with the results. Like, likely today's prices are going to be lows in comparison to the future. Or if we were to rewind 20 years ago, pretty much everybody would want to buy at 20 years ago's prices versus today. Um, so look to get the big picture. Don't necessarily be looking to time the market. um, but really focus on time in the market would be my encouragement, because the reality is money that's just sitting in a savings account, it is losing money day after day, week after week, month after month, year after year. And if you don't believe me, literally go to your local grocery store, a local restaurant, you can go to the gas pump, or whatever you do where you spend money in life, and just compare what the prices are now to what they were even just 6 months ago. And you'll see
It's
that
gonna
there's
sound it's
been a
gonna sound
shift.
funny because I'm a black man, but man, chicken done went up now. Chicken is expensive. Like, what happened? Why is chicken wings so expensive all of a sudden? I mean, like double and triple the price for a six wing. I don't understand. I don't understand.
Right, 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 right. It's disrespectful, man. It really is. It really is, man. It really is. Um, and there's not a whole lot we can do about the prices of stuff other than to say, hey, where can we park our money, uh, where it at least has a chance to outpace inflation? I mean, like, really and truly, you have to look at it that way, of money that's just purely saved, you will 100% lose money by just having it be saved. Like, it's a 100% inevitability. You can't get around it. And it may feel different. And I know, especially if I'm just, just some cultural competency of just us as African American people, we have historical reason to be, uh, exactly, to be more skeptical or cautious about what we do with our money, because we don't have as much wealth, so we can tend to want to hold on to it more tightly. But please hear me when I'm saying this. Like, for real, putting money under the mattress, it you will lose money. Like, you will. My man literally talked about the cost of chicken going up. Right. It is. And that's one of the one blessing of this environment, is that it makes it so clear what the dynamics are. So my heart goes out to people on a fixed income, that their income is not raising up as quickly as inflation is going up. So that, like, that really does bum me out. Which, by the way, part of my wealth journey is being generous. So I mean, that's a whole nother conversation to be had. Who knows? Maybe we'll get to talk again and really flesh that part out. But um, in the meantime, um, because of this harsh environment that we have with inflation, it's at least making it clear to us that eventually, when we come to a place where inflation is more normal-ish, around the 2 to 4% rate annually, we'll remember the lessons we learned when it's at 7 and 8.5% now, um, of we've got to put our money somewhere that has a chance to do better than the rate of inflation.
So I'm curious, what's your approach when it comes to savings? Do you have an emergency fund? Because it sounds like you go real hard with investments, rightfully so. What's your mantra when it comes to saving? Because you said, like, if we have too much in savings, we're taking L's because of it doesn't keep up at all, not even close to the rate of inflation. So it's going to be an L. So how do you approach the philosophy? What's your strategy for saving in the traditional sense?
Yeah, so I still think saving money has a place in in a person's financial picture. So, like, having an emergency fund, or a rainy day fund, if you want to go old school with it, um, it's still important. Like, it still helps to stabilize your finances, to have money tucked aside in the event. of an emergency or something that's unexpected that you didn't see coming. So I'm still there. Um, my mentality is just we want to save to a point and then really push on the investment journey. So to make it more practical. So you'll hear people say 3 to 6 months of expenses saved. I would say personal finances is personal. Um, so for some of you, 3 months, like you wouldn't be able to sleep well at night. For some, you may say, man, what I really would want is 10 months or 12 months. That's just saved and just there. Um, everyone's going to have to make that decision for themselves. Um, on that, whatever that number is, though, get to it and then get to investing. That's really my mindset. And yeah, as we have things like inflation happen, you may have to salt a little extra into your savings because it's being eroded by just the buying power of it's being knocked down. But yes, save to a point, and then I personally would invest beyond that. And I will give one kind of quick gem out here to the people of just something that I think is a good kind of rule of thumb that gets you to a place of starting to feel financially free. Um, I would say you'd start to kind of feel some financial security or financial independence, a little flexibility or freedom when you have enough assets to cover 60 months worth of expenses. And for my non yeah 60 months of expenses just in assets. For my non-math people, that's 5 years. Um, that's not a random number. The reason why I say that is uh, typically speaking, historically, you're not going to have a downturn last longer than 5 years. Um, I want to say the average is about 20 months. Um, so just kind of giving you a feel of just some numbers to think about that can hopefully help you.
So let's walk that out. So if it costs me right now $5,000 a month to live, you're saying multiple or expenses, you're saying multiply that by 60, and whatever that number, whatever your monthly number is times 60, I should be trying to have assets that have a value of that.
Yeah. So that in that case, it'd be $300,000 worth of assets, of positive, assets. That just trying to give people something directionally to drive towards. And for some of you, you may say, "Hey, my expenses are 5,000 a month, but I'd like to have 60 months worth of what would be ideal for me." You know what I mean? And maybe that's 10,000 a month. Well, then it'd be 600,000 would be the number of just trying to work your way and build your way towards some numbers that'll help to stabilize you and how you look at your personal financial picture.
That's a nugget. I appreciate it, man. So, hey, I know everybody want to keep up with you and check in on your journey. I know you share a lot online, so let everybody know how they can keep up with you.
Yeah, sure. So the first thing is my website is just Stephen with a V lstack.com, and that's just stack like a stack of boxes. So StephenLStack.com. I'll also do social media. I'm on Instagram and Facebook. The handle is at stacking with stack. So STACKING with stack. Um, and I'll just regularly share uh, just nuggets of encouragement or just practical things, mindset stuff, just to keep us moving in the right direction and how to look at look at money and how it incorporates with life. So those would be places to find me.
So we'll make sure that we got links to everything that Stephen mentioned in the show notes of this episode. Or if you're watching us on YouTube, look right underneath the video in the description box. You will find it there. Stephen, thank you so much for coming, sharing all this wisdom and your story, and encouraging all of us on our journey to financial freedom today. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
Well, there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Another fantastic edition of the His and Her Money Show is in the books. I hope you're inspired. I don't see how you could not be. So I hope you took good notes and that you're ready to take action, because one thing that you heard throughout Stephen's story is that he took action, even when he didn't have all the answers, and even though everything wasn't perfectly lined up. And as a result, he's been winning. And you can win too. He came on to share his story so that you can create one of your own. So go out and get it done. That's all we got for this time, guys. Until next time, peace.